The quiet hum of an internal craving often begins subtly, a whisper promising solace, an escape from the relentless grind of ordinary pain. It might manifest as the gentle urge for a second glass of wine after a stressful day, the fleeting thought of a forgotten prescription pill, or the magnetic pull toward the endless scroll of a digital feed. For a moment there is a release, a softening of edges, a brief respite from the anxieties of existence. But this moment, so eagerly sought, rarely lasts. Soon the whisper grows into a shout, the urge into a command, and the brief solace gives way to a deeper unease, a gnawing emptiness that only the next hit, the next fix, the next distraction seems capable of filling. Yet it never truly fills. It only postpones, deepens the void, and strengthens the chains that bind. This cyclical dance of craving, consumption, and consequence is a universal human pattern, one that transcends specific substances or behaviors, reflecting a profound interplay between our biology, our minds, and our very souls. This essay embarks on an integrated exploration of addiction, examining it not merely as a destructive habit or a moral failing, but as a complex phenomenon rooted deeply in both our psychological makeup and our spiritual condition. We will delve into the intricate dance of neurochemistry and early developmental experiences that shape vulnerability to addiction, alongside the ancient spiritual wisdom that understands craving as a fundamental aspect of human suffering and a misguided search for ultimate meaning. Our central thesis is that addiction represents a profound dis-ease of being, a psychological dysregulation of the self's capacity for genuine connection and self-soothing, and a spiritual yearning for wholeness, transcendence, or belonging, misdirected toward finite and ultimately unsatisfying external sources. True healing and liberation therefore necessitate an approach that honors and integrates both the scientific understanding of the mind and the contemplative insights of the spirit. From a psychological perspective, addiction is increasingly understood as a chronic relapsing brain disease characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. Neuroscience reveals the intricate reward pathways, particularly those involving dopamine, that become hijacked and rewired by addictive substances and behaviors, leading to powerful cravings and impaired impulse control. Attachment theory offers insights into how early relational trauma and unmet needs can create a predisposition for seeking external regulation and comfort, while cognitive behavioral models highlight the learned associations and thought patterns that perpetuate addictive cycles. Developmental psychology further illuminates how crucial periods of brain development and social learning contribute to vulnerability, especially during adolescence. Trauma-informed care also underscores the pervasive link between unresolved psychological wounds and the development of addictive patterns, suggesting that addiction often serves as a desperate, albeit ultimately ineffective, coping mechanism for profound pain. Complementing these psychological frameworks, a rich tapestry of spiritual traditions offers profound insights into the nature of craving, suffering, and the human search for meaning, all central themes in the experience of addiction. Buddhist teachings, for instance, illuminate tanha, craving or thirst, as a primary root of dukkha, suffering, emphasizing attachment to transient phenomena as a source of dissatisfaction. The path to liberation in Buddhism involves understanding and releasing these attachments, cultivating mindfulness, and recognizing the impermanence of all things. In Christian contemplative traditions, addiction can be seen through the lens of sin, not as a moral judgment, but as a state of separation from God or one's true divine nature, a misguided worship of idols in place of the sacred. Concepts like akidia, a spiritual sloth or restlessness that leads to a flight from inner work, resonate deeply with the avoidance patterns seen in addiction. Sufi wisdom speaks of the nafs, the lower self or ego, and its insatiable desires for worldly gratification, contrasting it with the heart's true longing for remembrance of the divine dhikr and ultimate union fana. Indigenous spiritualities often emphasize the importance of balance, community, and connection to nature, viewing addiction as a symptom of profound disconnection from self, tribe, ancestors, and the sacred web of life. Existential philosophy, while not strictly spiritual, offers a parallel lens, seeing addiction as a flight from freedom and responsibility, an attempt to escape the anxiety of meaning-making in a world without inherent purpose. By weaving together these diverse perspectives, this essay aims to provide a holistic and compassionate understanding of addiction. We will first establish a comprehensive psychological and spiritual framework, detailing the neurobiological underpinnings, developmental factors, and therapeutic approaches alongside the profound wisdom offered by various spiritual traditions. Following this, we will explore the modern manifestations of addiction, considering how contemporary societal pressures, digital technologies, and evolving cultural norms shape the landscape of compulsive behaviors. We will then bring these theories to life through brief, illustrative examples and case studies, drawing from both historical spiritual figures and contemporary clinical experiences. Finally, we will delve into practical integration, offering pathways for healing that combine evidence-based psychological interventions with time-honored spiritual practices, fostering a journey toward genuine recovery and spiritual awakening. It is through this integrated lens that we can begin to move beyond stigma and toward a deeper empathy, recognizing that the battle with addiction is, at its core, a universal human struggle for connection, meaning, and authentic presence. The whispers from the first chapter, detailing addiction as a profound disease of being, now coalesce into a comprehensive framework, revealing the intricate architecture of craving. We delve deeper into the psychological and spiritual dimensions, not as discrete entities, but as inextricably interwoven threads in the tapestry of human experience, each informing and amplifying the other. This chapter aims to illuminate how the brain, the mind, and the spirit conspire to create and sustain the relentless grip of addiction, and how the misguided search for ultimate meaning often finds its tragic expression through compromised neurochemistry and unaddressed existential voids. From a psychological perspective, the human brain, a marvel of evolutionary design, possesses a delicate reward system, primarily orchestrated by the neurotransmitter dopamine. This mesolimbic pathway, originating in the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and projecting to the nucleus accumbens, amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, is fundamentally designed to reinforce behaviors essential for survival: eating, drinking, reproduction, and social connection. It is the brain's internal compass, guiding us toward beneficial stimuli and away from harm. However, in the crucible of addiction, this vital system is not merely activated, it is hijacked and rewired. Substances and compulsive behaviors flood the reward pathway with dopamine at levels far exceeding natural rewards, creating an intense, immediate euphoria that the brain swiftly learns to prioritize. Repeated exposure to these potent stimuli leads to profound neuroplastic changes. The brain adapts, downregulating its natural dopamine receptors to cope with the artificial surge, a phenomenon known as tolerance. This necessitates ever-increasing doses or intensity to achieve the same desired effect, propelling the individual deeper into the cycle. Simultaneously, the brain undergoes sensitization in other areas, making it hyper-responsive to cues associated with the addictive behavior. A particular scent, a familiar street, an emotional trigger, each becomes a powerful signal, igniting an intense craving that can override rational thought and willpower. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like decision-making, impulse control, and judgment, becomes compromised, its ability to mediate the powerful urges emanating from the limbic system significantly diminished. This is why addiction is understood as a chronic, relapsing brain disease. It is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences, precisely because the very neural circuitry designed for survival has been re-engineered to prioritize the addictive agent. Yet this neurobiological vulnerability rarely emerges in a vacuum. A profound interplay of developmental and trauma perspectives often lays the groundwork for addiction. Early relational trauma, such as neglect, abuse, or inconsistent caregiving, can disrupt the natural development of secure attachment. Children who experience adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, learn to navigate a world perceived as unsafe or unpredictable. Their developing nervous systems become hypervigilant, often leading to a chronic state of dysregulation. In the absence of healthy coping mechanisms or secure external attachment figures, individuals may turn to substances or behaviors as a means of self-soothing, a desperate attempt to regulate overwhelming emotions, numb pain, or create a fleeting sense of control or connection. The addictive behavior becomes a maladaptive form of attachment, a substitute for the genuine connection that was absent or fractured in early life. It offers a predictable, albeit ultimately destructive solace from the gnawing emptiness or the echo chamber of distress. Furthermore, cognitive behavioral models illuminate how learned associations cement these pathways. Classical conditioning links environmental cues to the drug experience, while operant conditioning reinforces the behavior through both positive reinforcement, the initial pleasurable effects, and negative reinforcement, the alleviation of withdrawal symptoms or emotional pain. The individual learns that the substance or behavior is an effective, albeit temporary, escape from discomfort. Over time, a complex web of cognitive distortions emerges, rationalizations, denial, minimizing, which serve to maintain the addiction despite mounting evidence of its devastating impact. These maladaptive thought patterns, coupled with impaired executive function, create a powerful internal narrative that justifies continued use. While genetic predisposition also plays a significant role, conferring a heightened vulnerability to some, it is always in dynamic interaction with environmental stresses and individual psychological history. The genetic blueprint may load the gun, but environment and experience pull the trigger. Simultaneously, a profound spiritual framework unveils the deeper existential yearnings that addiction tragically attempts to fill. The gnawing emptiness is not merely a psychological deficit. It is often the spirit's cry for meaning, purpose, and genuine connection. Humanity's innate drive for transcendence, for something beyond the mundane, can be a powerful force for growth, or, when misdirected, a conduit for suffering. Addiction, in this light, becomes a misguided search for the divine, a desperate attempt to fill an internal void with external finite substitutes. From the Buddhist perspective, addiction is a quintessential manifestation of tanha or craving. The Buddha taught that suffering, dukkha, arises from attachment to impermanent phenomena and the relentless pursuit of desires. The cycle of addiction, craving, consumption, temporary satisfaction, and then renewed craving, perfectly illustrates this principle. The fleeting pleasure derived from the substance or behavior is inherently unsatisfactory because it is impermanent. The individual clings to the illusion of control and fulfillment, only to be met with the inevitable suffering of withdrawal, regret, and the deepening sense of disconnection. The path to liberation, according to Buddhist wisdom, lies in understanding the impermanent nature of all things and cultivating non-attachment, thereby dismantling the very roots of craving. Christian theology offers a parallel understanding through concepts like acedia and misguided worship. Acedia is not merely sloth, it is a spiritual apathy, a profound disengagement from the divine, from self, and from community. It represents a turning away from the arduous but ultimately fulfilling path of authentic living and genuine love, seeking instead a path of least resistance or immediate gratification. Addiction, in this context, becomes a form of idolatry, where the substance or behavior supplants God as the ultimate source of solace, meaning, and power. The individual worships the created rather than the creator, investing finite things with infinite significance, leading to a profound sense of spiritual isolation and despair. The true longing for divine grace and unconditional love is tragically misdirected towards a false God that promises peace, but delivers only bondage. Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, articulates this struggle as the conflict between the ego, nafs, and the spirit, heart, ruh. The nafs represents the lower self, driven by base desires, attachments, and self-serving impulses. It seeks immediate gratification and often leads to self-deception and separation from the divine. The rus, conversely, is the divine spark within, yearning for union with the beloved, for authentic connection, and for spiritual truth. Addiction is seen as the nafs dominating the individual, obscuring the voice of the ruh, leading to a life dictated by insatiable desires rather than spiritual wisdom. The journey of recovery in Sufism is a process of purifying the nafs, taming its impulses, and allowing the ruh to guide the individual toward true inner peace and divine connection. Indigenous spiritualities provide a holistic lens, viewing addiction as a symptom of deep disconnection from self, from community, from ancestral wisdom, and from the sacred natural world. These traditions emphasize the interconnectedness of all life and the importance of living in balance and harmony. When individuals lose their sense of place, purpose, or belonging within this larger web of existence, a profound spiritual wound emerges. Addiction becomes a desperate attempt to fill this void, often exacerbated by historical trauma, colonization, and the erosion of cultural identity. Healing is therefore understood as a process of reconnection, reclaiming one's identity, re-establishing ties with community, engaging in sacred ceremonies and rituals, and fostering a renewed reverence for the earth and all its inhabitants. Finally, existential philosophy frames addiction as a profound flight from freedom and responsibility. Faced with the inherent ambiguity of existence, the burden of choice, and the ultimate responsibility for creating one's own meaning in a seemingly meaningless world, some individuals recoil from this awesome freedom. The anxiety of facing one's own finitude and the absence of preordained purpose can be overwhelming. Addiction offers an escape, a surrender to an external force that dictates one's actions, thereby alleviating the dread of freedom. It is a refusal to confront the inherent ambiguity and the fundamental task of self-creation, choosing instead the illusory comfort of determinism. These psychological and spiritual frameworks, though originating from diverse disciplines and traditions, are not disparate. They are deeply interconnected, forming a comprehensive understanding of addiction. The psychological mechanisms, the hijacked dopamine pathways, the trauma responses, the maladaptive coping strategies, are often the very conduits through which spiritual longings are misdirected. The neurochemical craving for dopamine can become indistinguishable from the soul's yearning for solace, connection, or transcendence. Conversely, an unaddressed spiritual void, a profound sense of meaninglessness or disconnection, can exacerbate psychological vulnerabilities, making one more susceptible to the immediate, albeit fleeting, gratifications offered by addictive behaviors. The brain's capacity for rapid learning and adaptation, coupled with the mind's ability to construct narratives that justify behavior, creates a powerful feedback loop that entrenches addiction. To genuinely comprehend addiction, we must embrace this integrated perspective. A purely biochemical approach, while acknowledging the disease aspect, risks overlooking the profound cry of the soul and the existential dimensions of human suffering. Conversely, a purely spiritual approach, without understanding the neurobiological underpinnings and the impact of trauma, risks moralizing a disease and placing undue blame on the suffering individual. The human individual, the quote one, is a complex being, a biological organism, a psychological entity, and a spiritual seeker, all simultaneously. True healing and liberation, therefore, necessitate addressing both the internal landscapes of the brain and mind and the deeper spiritual yearnings that animate our existence. Only by understanding this dual architecture of craving can we dismantle the stigma, foster genuine compassion, and illuminate pathways toward holistic understanding and enduring recovery. The journey from the disease of addiction to a state of genuine connection and well-being necessitates an integrated approach, one that honors the intricate dance between biological predispositions, psychological vulnerabilities, and spiritual yearnings. As we have seen, the self, in its misguided search for ultimate meaning, often finds itself ensnared in patterns that hijack its neurochemistry and obscure its inherent spiritual essence. A truly compassionate and effective pathway to recovery, therefore, must address this multifaceted complexity, offering interventions that are both scientifically grounded and spiritually resonant. This chapter explores the synergistic strategies that guide the individual toward reclaiming their autonomy, fostering inner peace, and rediscovering a profound sense of purpose. Recovery is not merely the cessation of substance use or compulsive behavior. It is a profound process of transformation, a rewiring of the brain, and a reawakening of the spirit. It begins with acknowledging the biological underpinnings, recognizing addiction as a chronic relapsing brain disease. Medication-assisted treatment, EMAT for instance, often plays a crucial role in stabilizing the physiological landscape, mitigating withdrawal symptoms, and reducing cravings by modulating neurotransmitter systems that have been dysregulated. These pharmacological interventions provide a necessary foundation, allowing the individual the cognitive space and physical stability to engage in deeper psychological and spiritual work. They are not a panacea, but rather a vital support facilitating the brain's capacity for healing and neuroplasticity. On the psychological front, a panoply of therapeutic modalities addresses the cognitive distortions, emotional dysregulation, and behavioral patterns that sustain addiction. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, stands as a cornerstone, empowering individuals to identify and challenge the negative thought patterns and core beliefs that fuel craving and relapse. It teaches practical coping strategies for managing triggers, developing healthier responses to stress, and restructuring the internal narratives that reinforce addictive behaviors. Similarly, dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, with its emphasis on mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness, equips individuals with the skills to navigate intense emotions without resorting to maladaptive coping mechanisms. These therapies directly engage the prefrontal cortex, strengthening its capacity for executive function, impulse control, and rational decision-making, faculties often compromised by chronic addiction. Crucially, addressing the deep-seated wounds of early developmental trauma, ACEs, forms another pivotal aspect of psychological recovery. Trauma-informed therapies, such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, and somatic experiencing, offer pathways to process and integrate traumatic memories stored in the body and mind. By facilitating the safe release of trapped emotional energy and repatterning neural pathways, these approaches help individuals move beyond the reflexive fight, flight, or freeze responses that often underlie the need for self-medication. Similarly, attachment-based therapies aim to repair the relational wounds that often manifest as a pervasive sense of disconnection, fostering the capacity for secure attachment and genuine intimacy, thereby addressing the profound longing for belonging that addiction exploits. The healing of these psychological scars is not a linear process, but a gradual unfolding, allowing the individual to build a more resilient and integrated sense of self. Yet, even as psychological interventions meticulously address the mind's intricate workings, the spiritual void persists, demanding equally profound engagement. This is where the integrated framework truly illuminates the path forward. Mindfulness and meditation practices, rooted in contemplative traditions, particularly Buddhism, offer a powerful antidote to the relentless grip of tanha or craving. By cultivating present moment awareness, individuals learn to observe thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations, including cravings, without immediate reaction or judgment. This non-identification with internal states creates a vital space between stimulus and response, allowing for conscious choice rather than automatic compulsion. It fosters an understanding of impermanence, recognizing that even intense cravings are transient, thereby weakening their power. The search for meaning, A fundamental human drive, often misdirected in addiction, finds its proper orientation through practices that foster purpose and connection. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, for instance, guides individuals in identifying and pursuing transcendent meaning in their lives, moving beyond self-focus to embrace values, causes, and relationships that give life significance. This quest for meaning directly counters the existential emptiness and acedia that can drive addictive behaviors. For many, this involves reconnecting with spiritual traditions, whether through prayer, ritual, or engagement with sacred texts, which offer frameworks for understanding suffering, fostering gratitude, and cultivating a sense of awe. Community and connection emerge as powerful spiritual balms, directly addressing the pervasive sense of disconnection that characterizes addiction. 12-step programs, while not overtly religious, are profoundly spiritual fellowships, built on principles of honesty, self-inventory, making amends, and service to others. They provide a safe, non-judgmental space where individuals can share their experiences, find identification, and receive support from peers who understand their struggles. This shared journey fosters a sense of belonging, dismantling the isolation that addiction thrives upon, and re-establishing the vital bonds of human connection, echoing the indigenous wisdom of interconnectedness with all of creation. These communities offer a practical embodiment of the Sufi journey, from the ego-driven nafs to the spirit-centered ruh, as individuals learn to transcend self-absorption through mutual aid and shared vulnerability. Furthermore, cultivating virtues such as forgiveness, compassion, and altruism becomes integral to spiritual recovery. Self-compassion allows individuals to meet their own suffering with kindness rather than self-condemnation, a crucial step in healing the shame and guilt often associated with addiction. Extending compassion to others fosters empathy and strengthens relational bonds. Engaging in acts of service, contributing to something larger than oneself, provides a profound sense of purpose and meaning, shifting focus from self-gratification to generosity. This outward orientation helps to dismantle the self-centeredness often inherent in active addiction, facilitating a spiritual awakening that reorients the individual towards a life of contribution and connection. The synergy between these psychological and spiritual approaches is not merely additive, it is profoundly transformative. A person undergoing CBT to manage triggers simultaneously benefits from mindfulness practices that enhance their ability to observe cravings without acting on them. Trauma work that heals past wounds creates the internal safety necessary for spiritual exploration and deeper connection. Community support provides external accountability and belonging, while individual spiritual practices cultivate internal resilience and a sense of transcendent purpose. These pathways are not mutually exclusive, but rather interwoven strands in the tapestry of recovery, each reinforcing and enriching the others. Relapse, often a disheartening aspect of the recovery journey, is also illuminated by this integrated framework. It is not a moral failing, but a signal, often indicating an unmet psychological need, an unaddressed spiritual void, or a neurological trigger that has overwhelmed coping mechanisms. Understanding relapse through this lens fosters compassion rather than self-blame, allowing the individual and their support system to re-evaluate strategies, deepen their commitment to healing, and learn from the experience. It underscores that recovery is a process of continuous growth, a spiral rather than a straight line, where setbacks can become opportunities for deeper insight and renewed dedication. Ultimately, the integrated approach to recovery dismantles the stigma surrounding addiction by reframing it as a complex human condition stemming from a fundamental dis-ease of being. It moves beyond simplistic moral judgments to embrace a holistic understanding of the suffering individual. By addressing the biological, psychological, and spiritual dimensions concurrently, we offer a pathway not just to sobriety, but to genuine liberation, a reclaiming of the self's inherent wholeness, its capacity for love, connection, and purposeful existence. This comprehensive framework offers a profound hope, demonstrating that even from the depths of addiction, a life of profound meaning and authentic well-being is not only possible but within reach. The journey toward liberation from the chains of addiction, as we have established, transcends mere symptom management. It demands a profound re-architecture of being, a synergistic engagement with the biological, psychological, and spiritual dimensions of the self. This chapter delves into the intricate mechanisms by which this integrated approach fosters holistic recovery, moving beyond the abstract framework to illuminate the practical pathways through which individuals reclaim their inherent wholeness, connection, and purposeful existence. We explore how these diverse therapeutic modalities do not merely coexist, but rather interpenetrate, creating a dynamic ecosystem of healing that addresses the multifaceted, quote, three true liberation begins with establishing a stable foundation, often necessitating interventions that address the immediate biological dysregulation. Medication-assisted treatment, MAT, far from being a mere substitution, serves as a crucial scaffold, stabilizing the brain's neurochemistry and mitigating the acute physiological distress that frequently sabotages early recovery efforts. By reducing cravings and withdrawal symptoms, MAT creates a vital window of opportunity, allowing the individual's ravaged neurobiological landscape to begin its slow process of repair. This biological stabilization is not an end in itself, but a critical prerequisite, a necessary quieting of the internal storm that enables the deeper, more introspective psychological and spiritual work to commence. It acknowledges the physical reality of addiction, honoring the body's need for care while simultaneously preparing the mind for transformation. With the biological terrain stabilized, the focus shifts to the intricate landscape of the psyche. Psychological therapies become the compass and map, guiding the individual through the labyrinth of cognitive distortions, emotional dysregulation, and unresolved trauma that underpin addictive patterns. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, empowers the individual to identify and challenge the maladaptive thought patterns that perpetuate craving and relapse. It is a process of metacognition, where the mind learns to observe its own processes, discerning the whispers of self-deception from the voice of authentic self-interest. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, with its emphasis on mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, equips the individual with concrete skills to navigate the turbulent currents of intense emotions without resorting to addictive coping mechanisms. It fosters a profound shift from reactivity to considered response, cultivating a resilient internal locus of control. Crucially, trauma-informed and attachment-based therapies delve into the deeper historical wounds that often serve as the genesis of the dis-ease of being. These approaches recognize that addiction frequently arises as a desperate, albeit misguided, attempt to self-soothe the profound pain of early adverse experiences or insecure attachment relationships. By providing a safe, consistent, and empathetic therapeutic container, individuals can begin to process and integrate past traumas, repairing the fractured sense of self and developing secure internal working models. This work is not merely about recounting past events, but about re-experiencing and re-regulating the physiological and emotional imprints of trauma, allowing the nervous system to find a new equilibrium. It is through this diligent psychological excavation that the authentic self, long buried beneath layers of pain and protective mechanisms, begins to re-emerge, capable of genuine connection and self-compassion. Yet, even with biological stability and psychological insight, a profound emptiness can persist if the spiritual dimension remains unaddressed. The misguided search for ultimate meaning, the deep craving, tanha, for something beyond the material, demands a spiritual reawakening. This is not necessarily about adherence to specific religious dogma, but rather the cultivation of practices and perspectives that foster a sense of purpose, transcendence, and interconnectedness. Mindfulness, a cornerstone of spiritual practice, trains the mind to reside in the present moment, observing thoughts and sensations without judgment. This practice directly counters the restless yearning and mental proliferation that fuel craving, offering a sanctuary of stillness and acceptance. Through sustained mindfulness, the individual learns to sit with discomfort, to experience the full spectrum of human emotion without needing to escape, thereby dismantling the very impulse that drives addiction. Meaning-making, another vital spiritual pathway, involves actively constructing a narrative of purpose from the fragments of past suffering. It is the process of finding wisdom in adversity, transforming personal pain into a source of empathy and service. This often manifests in acts of altruism, engagement in creative pursuits, or dedication to a cause greater than oneself. When individuals begin to perceive their lives as imbued with inherent value and their experiences as opportunities for growth, the gnawing emptiness that once sought solace in external substances or behaviors begins to recede, replaced by an intrinsic sense of fulfillment. Community support, whether through formal 12-step programs, peer recovery groups, or informal networks of connection, provides a vital spiritual anchor. It counters the profound isolation inherent in addiction, fostering a sense of belonging and shared humanity. In these spaces, individuals witness their own struggles mirrored in others, transcending shame and cultivating empathy. The reciprocal acts of sharing, listening, and supporting become a powerful antidote to the self-absorption of active addiction, reinforcing the understanding that authentic connection is the true antidote to disconnection. Finally, the cultivation of virtues such as compassion, honesty, humility, patience, and perseverance forms the ethical bedrock of spiritual recovery. These are not abstract ideals, but practical guides for living, shaping daily choices and interactions. By striving to embody these virtues, individuals actively rebuild their character, restoring integrity and fostering a sense of self-respect that was often eroded by the behaviors of addiction. This internal shift in moral compass reorients the self towards actions that align with its deepest values, moving away from the impulsive gratifications that once dictated its course. While the individual journey is paramount, the overarching goal of holistic liberation presents an ongoing, profound challenge for society as a whole. Addiction is not merely an individual failing, but a complex public health crisis, deeply interwoven with social determinants, economic disparities, and cultural narratives. Therefore, true societal healing demands a collective shift in understanding and response. Dismantling stigma is perhaps the most urgent societal imperative. The historical moralization of addiction has perpetuated a cycle of shame, judgment, and isolation, preventing countless individuals from seeking the help they desperately need. Society must move decisively from viewing addiction as a moral failing or a criminal act to recognizing it as a chronic, treatable medical condition influenced by a myriad of biological, psychological, and social factors. This paradigm shift impacts everything from public policy and healthcare funding to the language we use and the attitudes we hold. When addiction is understood as a disease of being rather than a character flaw, resources can be redirected from punitive measures to comprehensive prevention, treatment, and recovery support services. Furthermore, society bears a responsibility to create environments conducive to health and well-being, thereby addressing the root causes that often predispose individuals to addiction. This includes ensuring equitable access to quality healthcare, mental health services, education, stable housing, and meaningful employment. When communities are characterized by economic insecurity, social fragmentation, and pervasive trauma, the fertile ground for addiction is inadvertently cultivated. Investing in robust social safety nets and fostering environments of opportunity and connection are not just acts of compassion, but essential strategies for addiction prevention. The societal response to relapse also requires a profound reorientation. If relapse is indeed a signal for deeper understanding, a natural albeit challenging component of a chronic disease, then punitive or shaming reactions are counterproductive. Instead, systems must be designed to offer flexible, responsive support, viewing relapse as an opportunity for reassessment and recalibration of treatment strategies. This demands accessible crisis intervention, ongoing therapeutic engagement, and empathetic community reintegration programs that prioritize long-term recovery over short-term compliance. Ultimately, the process of holistic liberation is not a destination but an ongoing journey, a dynamic, iterative reclaiming of the self's inherent potential. It is a continuous dance between vulnerability and resilience, between introspection and engagement with the world. The individual, once fragmented and driven by insatiable craving, gradually reweaves the tapestry of their being, integrating past experiences into a coherent narrative of growth. The gnawing emptiness gives way to a profound sense of intrinsic worth and purpose, no longer dependent on external fixes. This journey cultivates a deeper understanding of genuine connection to a reintegrated self, to a supportive community, and to a meaningful existence. It is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for transformation, demonstrating that even from the depths of profound suffering, a life of profound purpose and authentic joy can emerge. The challenge remains for individuals and for society to cultivate the compassion, wisdom, and sustained effort required to facilitate this profound reawakening, ensuring that the path to wholeness is accessible to all who seek it. The profound mystery of how society cultivates the compassion, wisdom, and sustained effort required for collective reawakening remains. It is a question that transcends individual healing, demanding an epistemological shift in our collective consciousness, a fundamental recalibration of how we understand, categorize, and respond to human suffering and vulnerability. For just as the individual's journey from addiction necessitates a profound re-architecture of being, a dismantling of old patterns and a rebuilding of self, so too does society's liberation from the pervasive shadow of this, quote, seven, demand a fundamental reimagining of its structures and values. This shadow extends beyond individual struggles, manifesting in widespread despair, a crisis of meaning, and a gnawing sense of disconnection that permeates communities. We move now beyond the individual's path to embrace the imperative of systemic transformation, recognizing that genuine healing is not merely personal, but profoundly communal, an interwoven tapestry of individual and collective well-being. The dismantling of stigma, while crucial, is but the nascent stage of this societal evolution. It is not enough to simply cease judgment, to whisper addiction is a disease, while our systems continue to punish and ostracize. We must actively cultivate environments where vulnerability is met with robust, unwavering support, where the innate human longing for connection, purpose, and meaning finds authentic, uninhibited expression, and where suffering is understood not as a moral failing or an isolated incident, but as a clear, urgent signal for collective intervention. This requires moving beyond a reactive, punitive paradigm that seeks to isolate and control, to a proactive, preventative, and deeply compassionate framework that seeks to integrate and uplift. We must institutionalize empathy, embedding it within the very fabric of our social, economic, and political systems, from the design of public spaces to the metrics by which we measure societal progress, ensuring that human dignity and flourishing are always at the core. Imagine a public servant asking, "How will this policy impact the most vulnerable among us? Does it foster connection or isolation?" A simple question, yet one that could redefine governance. Consider the profound impact of societal scaffolding on the individual's journey. When access to integrated care remains fragmented, a labyrinth of referrals and wait lists that exhaust even the most resilient spirit. When housing insecurity and poverty create a relentless grind of survival, forcing individuals into impossible choices between food, shelter, and medical care, eroding their mental and physical reserves daily. And when educational disparities perpetuate cycles of disadvantage, denying whole communities the tools for upward mobility and self-determination, the inherent vulnerability to addiction is magnified exponentially. These are not mere background conditions that individuals can overcome with sheer willpower. They are active, potent determinants of health and well-being, shaping the neurobiological landscape and the psychological resilience of individuals from conception. Chronic stress, the constant vigilance required to navigate systemic inequities, rewires the brain, impacting executive function and emotional regulation. A society truly committed to addressing addiction must therefore confront these foundational inequities head-on, understanding that a secure, stable, and nurturing environment where basic needs are met and opportunities abound is the most potent preventative medicine, a true antidote to the despair that so often fuels maladaptive coping. This commitment manifests in concrete policy shifts, moving beyond rhetoric to tangible action. Universal, equitable access to comprehensive healthcare becomes paramount, ensuring that integrated medical, psychological, and spiritual care is not a privilege reserved for the fortunate few, but a fundamental human right. This includes not only evidence-based interventions like medication-assisted treatment, MAT, and diverse psychotherapies tailored to individual needs, but also robust support for spiritual guidance, community integration, and meaning-making practices. Spiritual care, for instance, might involve facilitating connections to faith communities, offering mindfulness training, or providing opportunities for creative expression and engagement with nature, all aimed at fostering a deeper sense of purpose and belonging. Such access must be unburdened by prohibitive costs, geographical barriers that isolate rural communities, or the labyrinthine complexities of insurance bureaucracy that turn seeking help into an exhausting, demoralizing battle against paperwork and denials. Imagine a person, weary from years of struggle, walking into a clinic and being met with a compassionate navigator who says, quote 10, "It is an investment in human capital," end quote. A recognition that the flourishing of each individual contributes immeasurably to the vitality, creativity, and resilience of the whole society. Furthermore, a truly recovery-oriented society must critically examine and reform its justice system. The current punitive approach, which often criminalizes addiction rather than treating it as a public health issue, perpetuates cycles of incarceration, further marginalizing individuals, dismantling their social supports, and making reintegration into society nearly impossible. Quote at Glaustiamt. An incarcerated individual might silently think, quote to Joseph, a shift towards diversion programs that funnel individuals into treatment instead of jail, drug courts focused on therapeutic outcomes rather than punishment, and decarceration initiatives is essential. These reforms acknowledge that the chains of addiction are not broken by the bars of a cell, which only deepen the wounds of trauma and isolation, but by the compassionate hands of healers, the unwavering support of family, and the supportive embrace of community. They represent an understanding that true justice involves restoring individuals to wholeness, to their inherent dignity and potential, not merely punishing their symptoms. A judge, witnessing the revolving door of the justice system, might reflect, quote, 13. Beyond treatment and reform, the greatest societal imperative lies in prevention, addressing the root causes of quote 14 before they fully manifest. This begins in the earlier stages of life, with robust, sustained investments in early childhood development. Secure attachment, fostered through supportive parenting programs, high-quality early education, and stable home environments, lays the neurobiological and psychological groundwork for resilience, equipping children with the emotional regulation skills and relational capacities needed to navigate life's challenges. Trauma-informed care, integrated into schools, healthcare systems, and community programs, acknowledges the pervasive, often invisible impact of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, from neglect and abuse to household dysfunction, and provides pathways for healing and regulation, rather than allowing unaddressed wounds to fester into future vulnerabilities like chronic disease, mental health issues, and substance use disorders. In a trauma-informed school, a child acting out might be met with curiosity and support rather than immediate punishment, with educators trained to ask, "What happened to you?" instead of, "What's wrong with you?" Education must transcend mere academic instruction to include comprehensive social-emotional learning, equipping individuals with emotional literacy, self-regulation skills, empathy, and the capacity for genuine connection, teaching them how to process difficult emotions and build healthy relationships. At a broader level, society must actively foster communal cohesion and ontological security. The atomization of modern life, characterized by increasing social isolation, the superficiality of digital disconnection, and the erosion of traditional community structures like neighborhood associations and civic groups, leaves many individuals adrift, searching for an existential anchor. This ontological insecurity, a deep sense of not belonging, of lacking a stable place in the world, is a fertile ground for dis-ease. A recovery-oriented society consciously cultivates opportunities for genuine connection, civic engagement, and shared purpose. This might involve supporting local community initiatives that bring people together, creating accessible public spaces that encourage spontaneous interaction and shared experience, promoting volunteerism as a pathway to altruism and connection, and fostering intergenerational relationships that bridge divides and share wisdom. Imagine vibrant town squares, community gardens where elders and youth work side by side, or mentorship programs that connect experienced professionals with young people seeking guidance. When individuals feel deeply embedded within a supportive social fabric, their innate longing for belonging is met, significantly reducing the likelihood that they will seek solace or escape in maladaptive coping mechanisms. This vision of a recovery-oriented society is one where compassion is not merely an individual virtue, an occasional act of kindness, but an institutionalized principle that guides every policy, every interaction, every system. It is a society that understands tanha, the insatiable craving for pleasure, escape, or material possessions, not as a moral failing, but as a misdirected universal longing for wholeness, for genuine connection and fulfillment, capable of being rechanneled towards authentic well-being. It recognizes acedia, or spiritual starvation, a profound lack of purpose and meaning, as a symptom of a deeper societal malaise rooted in consumerism, individualism, and existential dread, and actively provides pathways to nourishment through meaning-making, purpose, and authentic connection. Such a society would prioritize the mental and spiritual health of its citizens with the same fervor it dedicates to physical health, understanding that these domains are inextricably linked, each influencing the vitality of the other. It would celebrate mental health days, fund community wellness centers, and invest in arts and culture as essential components of public health. The cultivation of this collective wisdom and empathy requires a sustained, multi-pronged effort. It involves re-educating the populace through innovative public health campaigns that dismantle myths about addiction, replacing fear and judgment with understanding and hope. It demands media representations that humanize those struggling, showcasing their resilience, their stories of recovery, and their contributions to society, rather than perpetuating harmful stereotypes. It necessitates educational curricula that promote a holistic understanding of human vulnerability and resilience from an early age. It demands courageous leadership that champions evidence-based approaches over moralistic rhetoric, leadership willing to challenge entrenched interests and short-sighted political expediency for the sake of long-term well-being. This will be difficult, a leader might acknowledge, but the cost of inaction is far greater than the effort required for change. This is not a utopian fantasy, a distant, unattainable ideal, but a profound societal imperative. The mystery of how society will cultivate the compassion, wisdom, and sustained effort required for this reawakening is, in essence, the mystery of our own collective humanity, a test of our capacity for empathy and foresight. It is a call to recognize that the individual's journey of recovery, a path of self-discovery, healing, and reintegration, is mirrored by society's journey towards greater enlightenment and integration. Every act of kindness, every supportive policy, every investment in human flourishing contributes to the weaving of a new communal tapestry, one where the threads of empathy, understanding, and genuine connection are so strong, so intricately interwoven, that they offer a robust safety net for all, catching those who stumble and lifting them back up. The path is arduous, fraught with the inertia of established norms, the persistent shadows of misunderstanding, and the powerful forces of resistance to change. Yet the potential for collective liberation, for a society where the inherent potential of every human being is not only recognized but actively nurtured, where suffering is met with collective care, makes this endeavor an unwavering moral and practical imperative. It is a continuous act of creation, a shared responsibility that calls upon each of us, and the ultimate testament to our capacity for profound transformation, not just as individuals navigating our personal struggles, but as a species evolving towards a more compassionate, integrated, and truly flourishing future. The collective reawakening, previously identified as the profound societal imperative, is not a mere aspiration, but a demanding reconstruction of our communal architecture. It entails far more than incremental policy adjustments. It necessitates a fundamental paradigm shift in how we perceive suffering, administer justice, and cultivate well-being. This transformation calls for an unwavering commitment to dismantle entrenched systems of marginalization and erect, in their place, robust frameworks of support, understanding, and genuine connection. We are tasked with nothing less than rewriting the societal script, moving from a narrative of individual failing to one of collective responsibility and shared flourishing. The first, and perhaps most formidable barrier to this reawakening is the pervasive stigma surrounding addiction. This stigma, a corrosive legacy of moralistic judgments and punitive ideologies, ensnares individuals in a cycle of shame and isolation, effectively barring them from the very compassion and care essential for healing. It manifests not only in overt discrimination, but also in subtle biases embedded within healthcare systems, employment practices, and even casual discourse. To dismantle this edifice of prejudice, we must first confront its intellectual and emotional roots. Education becomes a potent antidote, elucidating addiction not as a character flaw, but as a complex neurobiological and psychosocial condition, often exacerbated by trauma and systemic inequities. Public awareness campaigns, authentic media representations, and crucially, the amplification of lived experiences can humanize the struggle, fostering empathy where judgment once resided. When individuals with substance use disorders are seen not as pariahs but as fellow travellers on life's often arduous path, capable of recovery and meaningful contribution, the foundations of stigma begin to crumble. Hand in hand with dismantling stigma is the imperative to institutionalize empathy. This is not about individual acts of kindness, however vital, but about embedding compassion into the very fabric of our societal structures. How do healthcare systems, often strained and depersonalized, become genuine sanctuaries of healing? It requires comprehensive training for professionals across all sectors, ensuring a trauma-informed lens is applied to every interaction. It demands policies that prioritize accessibility over gatekeeping, prevention over crisis intervention, and holistic care over fragmented treatment modalities. This institutionalized empathy extends to every point of contact, from emergency rooms where individuals in crisis are met with dignity rather than dismissal, to social service agencies that offer unconditional support rather than conditional judgment, to educational settings that foster resilience and emotional literacy from an early age. It is a commitment to seeing the inherent worth and potential in every person, regardless of their current struggles, and designing systems that reflect that profound belief. Beyond the attitudinal shifts, the collective reawakening demands a rigorous examination and rectification of foundational inequities that render vast swathes of the population vulnerable to the insidious grip of addiction. The quote, 21 is not an isolated phenomenon, but is often deeply interwoven with the fabric of socio-economic disparity. Lack of access to quality health care, particularly mental health services, leaves untreated psychological wounds festering, pushing individuals towards self-medication. Housing instability strips away the bedrock of security, creating a relentless existential anxiety that substances can temporarily quiet. Educational deficits limit opportunities, breeding despair and a sense of futility. These are not tangential issues, they are primary drivers of addiction, creating fertile ground for its proliferation. Therefore, addressing these foundational inequities becomes a paramount preventative strategy and an essential component of recovery infrastructure. Universal access to comprehensive health care, including robust mental health and addiction treatment services, must be enshrined as a fundamental right. This means dismantling financial barriers, expanding the workforce of qualified professionals, and integrating care models that address both physical and psychological well-being. Affordable, stable housing is not merely shelter. It is a prerequisite for safety, dignity, and the capacity to engage in recovery. Initiatives that ensure living wages and equitable educational opportunities are investments in human potential, providing pathways to purpose and genuine connection that counteract the allure of escape. When society actively works to mitigate the stresses that drive individuals to seek solace in maladaptive coping mechanisms, it is simultaneously building a more resilient and compassionate collective. Nowhere is the need for systemic transformation more acute than within the justice system. For too long, addiction has been treated as a criminal failing rather than a public health crisis, leading to cycles of incarceration that exacerbate trauma, dismantle families, and perpetuate disadvantage. The punitive model, rooted in retribution, has demonstrably failed to curb addiction rates or foster genuine rehabilitation. The reawakening demands a radical shift from punishment to healing, from incarceration to diversion and therapeutic jurisprudence. This paradigm shift advocates for specialized drug courts that prioritize treatment and rehabilitation over punitive sentencing, offering individuals the opportunity to engage in structured recovery programs under judicial oversight. Restorative justice practices, which focus on repairing harm and fostering accountability through dialogue and community involvement, can replace traditional punitive measures, particularly for non-violent drug offences. Community-based alternatives to incarceration, such as residential treatment centres, intensive outpatient programs, and peer support networks, provide more effective and humane pathways to recovery, allowing individuals to remain connected to their communities and support systems. Critically, this reimagining of justice also requires acknowledging and addressing the profound trauma often experienced by those within the carceral system, many of whom are grappling with unaddressed psychological wounds that fuel their substance use. The goal is not merely to reduce recidivism, but to foster genuine reintegration, equipping individuals with the tools and support necessary to build meaningful, productive lives beyond the shadow of addiction and incarceration. Perhaps the most potent strategy for a collective reawakening lies in prioritizing prevention and early intervention, cultivating resilience and well-being from the earliest stages of life. The seeds of vulnerability to addiction are often sown in childhood through insecure attachment, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and environments lacking in consistent care and emotional support. Therefore, a truly compassionate society must invest profoundly in early childhood development, ensuring every child has access to nurturing environments that foster secure attachment, emotional regulation skills, and a strong sense of self-worth. This includes universal access to high-quality early education, comprehensive prenatal and postnatal support for families, and robust programs designed to identify and mitigate the impact of trauma in young lives. Beyond early childhood, schools and communities must become bastions of holistic development, equipping young people with the psychological and emotional tools to navigate life's inevitable challenges. This involves curricula that teach emotional literacy, critical thinking, and healthy coping mechanisms alongside academic subjects. It means fostering environments where mental health is discussed openly, where seeking help is normalized, and where genuine connection and belonging are actively cultivated. Community-level initiatives, youth mentorship programs, accessible recreational activities, artistic outlets, and opportunities for civic engagement provide vital protective factors, countering the isolation and despair that can push adolescents towards substance use. By building robust social safety nets and creating abundant opportunities for purpose-driven engagement, we proactively address the gnawing emptiness that addiction so tragically attempts to fill. Ultimately, the aspiration of a collective reawakening converges upon the profound goal of fostering communal cohesion and ontological security for all. When we dismantle stigma, institutionalize empathy, rectify foundational inequities, reform the justice system, and prioritize prevention, we are not merely addressing the symptoms of addiction. We are cultivating a society where the conditions that give rise to the disease of being are systematically diminished. We are building communities where individuals feel seen, heard, valued, and genuinely connected, a societal antidote to the profound disconnection that lies at the heart of much suffering. This journey is, in essence, a spiritual endeavour on a grand scale. It calls upon humanity to reconnect with its deepest shared values: compassion, justice, mutual aid, and the inherent dignity of every life. It is a collective turning away from the idolatry of individualism and consumption towards a recognition of our profound interdependence. The cultivation of communal cohesion fosters a shared sense of purpose, a collective meaning-making that transcends individualistic pursuits and offers a profound counter-narrative to the fleeting solace of addiction. When society provides abundant pathways for genuine connection, meaningful contribution, and a secure sense of belonging, it creates an environment where the desperate search for external fixes becomes less compelling. This transformation is neither swift nor simple. It demands sustained effort, political will, and an unwavering commitment to a vision of a more humane and integrated future. It is a continuous process of evolution, requiring constant self-reflection, adaptation, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet the reward is immeasurable. A society where the suffering of addiction is mitigated not just through individual recovery, but through a collective flourishing that truly liberates the human spirit from its chains, enabling genuine connection and purpose for all. The path forward is arduous, but it is illuminated by the profound potential for a world where every individual can experience the ontological security and communal embrace that are their birthright. The profound societal imperative, the arduous, ongoing spiritual endeavour of collective reawakening, beckons us now to explore its pathways. It is not enough to merely identify the necessity of transformation. We must also articulate the mechanisms through which such a monumental shift might begin to manifest. The journey from a punitive, reactive paradigm to one rooted in prevention, compassion, and holistic well-being demands a fundamental reimagining, not only of our policies and institutions, but of our very collective consciousness. We stand at a precipice, feeling the gentle, yet insistent tremor of change beneath our feet, a quiet yearning for something more just, more humane, more deeply connected. This reawakening is not a sudden flash but a gradual dawning, a slow unfurling of understanding, much like the first rays of morning light piercing through a long dark night. It asks us to look inward as a society and question the fundamental assumptions that have shaped our responses to suffering for generations. It challenges us to move beyond the superficial symptoms and confront the underlying conditions that perpetuate cycles of pain and disconnection. At the heart of this transformation lies the imperative to cultivate widespread understanding and empathy. The pervasive stigma surrounding addiction, born of ignorance and moral judgment, acts as a formidable barrier to healing. It is a heavy shroud that not only isolates the individual but also blinds the collective, preventing us from seeing the full spectrum of human experience. We must collectively lift the veil of misunderstanding, illuminating addiction not as a moral failing, a weakness of character or a deliberate choice to inflict harm, but as a complex dis-ease of being, often rooted in trauma, neurobiological dysregulation, and a profound spiritual yearning. Imagine the silent internal struggle of someone living with addiction, burdened not only by their condition, but by the crushing weight of societal scorn, whispering to themselves, if only they knew, if only they understood. This requires an unwavering commitment to public education, disseminating accurate, evidence-based knowledge that challenges deeply entrenched myths and fosters a trauma-informed lens across all societal sectors. Imagine curricula in schools that teach emotional literacy, resilience, and the neurobiology of stress and connection, rather than perpetuating narratives of individual weakness. Picture a classroom where children learn not to fear vulnerability, but to understand the intricate dance between our brains, our experiences, and our coping mechanisms, fostering an early sense of compassion and self-awareness. Envision public health campaigns that reframe addiction through the lens of human suffering and the universal search for meaning, rather than criminalization or sensationalism. These campaigns would speak directly to the heart, perhaps featuring diverse voices sharing stories of resilience and recovery, prompting a collective inner thought. Could it be that we've been looking at this all wrong? This collective rewriting of the societal script is the first step in dismantling the structures of blame and shame that isolate individuals and obstruct their path to recovery, allowing a fragile bud of hope to finally break through the hardened ground of judgment. Beyond awareness, the societal reawakening necessitates a radical reimagining of our social architectures. The gnawing emptiness that fuels addiction is not solely an individual malady. It is often exacerbated, if not directly engendered, by systemic inequities and a pervasive lack of ontological security. This emptiness is a deep, resonant ache within the soul, a void that individual willpower alone cannot fill when the external world constantly reinforces a sense of precarity and worthlessness. We must recognize that economic precarity, inadequate housing, and limited access to comprehensive health care are not merely social problems. They are profound vulnerabilities that deepen the dis-ease of being and amplify the allure of maladaptive coping mechanisms. When the very ground beneath one's feet feels unstable, when the basic human need for safety and belonging is unmet, the temptation to seek solace in transient, often destructive escapes becomes overwhelmingly powerful. Addressing these foundational inequities becomes an act of collective healing. Universal access to integrated physical, mental, and addiction care, for instance, transcends mere policy. It is an affirmation of the inherent dignity and value of every human life, recognizing health as a fundamental human right. It's a societal declaration that says, quote, 29, quote, "This means dismantling the complex bureaucratic hurdles and financial barriers that currently prevent millions from accessing essential care, replacing them with systems designed for ease, dignity, and immediate support. Similarly, ensuring stable, safe housing for all is not merely an economic decision, but a cornerstone of psychological and spiritual stability, providing the sanctuary necessary for introspection and growth." How can one begin the arduous work of healing when the immediate concern is where they will sleep tonight, or if their children are safe? A stable home offers more than shelter. It offers a sense of rootedness, a quiet space for reflection, and the basic security required to build a life of purpose and connection. When the basic scaffolding of well-being is absent, the human spirit struggles to find its footing, often seeking solace in the transient gratifications that lead to addiction, mistaking fleeting relief for genuine peace. Furthermore, we must consciously invest in the cultivation of communal cohesion and genuine belonging. the atomizing forces of modern society, hyper-individualism, digital isolation, the relentless grind of consumerism, erode the very fabric of human connection, leaving many adrift in a sea of anomie. We have, perhaps unconsciously, built a world where individual achievement is lauded above collective well-being, where screens mediate our interactions, and where the endless pursuit of material possessions often leaves us feeling more empty than before. Addiction often thrives in these spaces of disconnection, promising a counterfeit intimacy or a fleeting escape from the profound loneliness of the isolated self. It whispers promises of belonging, even as it pulls individuals further into isolation. To counteract this, we must actively foster environments where authentic connection can flourish. This involves revitalizing community centers, transforming them into vibrant hubs where people of all ages can gather, learn, and share. It means investing in public spaces, parks, plazas, libraries, that encourage spontaneous interaction and shared experiences, rather than merely serving as transit points. It calls for supporting intergenerational programs where the wisdom of elders can be shared with the energy of youth, and vice versa, creating a sense of continuity and mutual respect. And crucially, it demands strengthening mutual aid networks that underscore our interdependence, reminding us that we are stronger together, that neighbours' struggle is our shared concern. It is about creating societies where every individual feels seen, valued, and inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole. This is a deliberate process of reweaving the threads of our social tapestry, moving from a collection of isolated selves to a vibrant, supportive collective where the silent question, "Do I matter?" is met with a resounding "yes," unequivocally. The magnitude of this societal transformation demands visionary leadership across all sectors, political, corporate, academic, and spiritual. These leaders must possess not only intellectual acumen, but also profound moral imagination and an unwavering commitment to compassionate action. They are the architects who must prioritize long-term societal well-being over short-term political or economic gains, demonstrating the courage to challenge entrenched interests and advocate for systemic changes that may initially appear costly, but ultimately yield immeasurable returns in human flourishing. Imagine a corporate CEO declaring, "Our bottom line isn't just profit, it's the health and happiness of our community." Or a politician facing re-election, choosing to invest in preventative care programs over punitive measures, knowing the long-term benefit outweighs the immediate political risk. Their role is to articulate a compelling vision of a society where the disease of being is understood, where healing is accessible, and where the human spirit is nurtured rather than neglected. This leadership must be decentralized, emerging from grassroots movements as much as from established institutions, fostering a collective will to evolve. It's a symphony of voices, from the quiet advocate in a local support group to the policymaker on a national stage, all harmonizing around a shared vision of a more compassionate future. Yet this path is fraught with inherent difficulties and resistance. Shifting paradigms deeply embedded in societal structures and mindsets is an immense undertaking. There will be resistance from those who benefit from the status quo, whether through the prison industrial complex, certain pharmaceutical interests, or the perpetuation of systems that exploit human vulnerability. Voices will rise arguing, but this is how it's always been done. or change is too expensive, too risky. There will be fear of change, fear of the unknown, and the pervasive human tendency to cling to familiar, albeit dysfunctional patterns. The argument of cost will inevitably arise, challenging investments in prevention, treatment, and social support. Can we afford universal healthcare? Can we afford stable housing for all? These voices will ask, often with genuine concern, but sometimes with thinly veiled self-interest. However, we must consistently counter this with the value argument, demonstrating that the long-term societal benefits, reduced crime, improved public health, increased productivity, and a more vibrant, compassionate society far outweigh the upfront investments. We must paint a vivid picture of a future where emergency rooms are less burdened, where neighbourhoods are safer, where the collective genius of every individual is unleashed, arguing that the true cost, we must argue, lies in our collective inaction and the continued suffering of millions, the silent suffering, the lost potential, the broken families. These are the true expenses we can no longer afford. Ultimately, the societal transformation we envision is, at its core, a spiritual endeavour. It is not merely about policy adjustments or programmatic changes. It is about a profound shift in collective consciousness, a reorientation of our deepest values and priorities. This involves cultivating virtues at a societal level: empathy, compassion, justice, solidarity, patience, and wisdom. It requires a collective spiritual practice of dismantling ignorance, confronting our collective shadows, the uncomfortable truths about our historical injustices and systemic cruelties, and fostering mutual care. We must examine how our current societal structures, driven by insatiable material accumulation and a pervasive sense of scarcity, mirror the individual tanha or craving that fuels addiction. The relentless pursuit of more at the expense of enough is a societal addiction in itself. We must confront the collective tsiddhya, the spiritual sloth and apathy, that allows suffering to persist in our midst, the resigned shrug that says, "That's just the way things are." This transformation calls for a societal repentance, a turning away from destructive patterns and a reorientation towards genuine well-being, both individual and collective. It is about recognizing that true liberation is not found in isolated pursuits, but in the interwoven tapestry of shared human experience, where the strength of one thread fortifies the entire fabric. This grand endeavour, this collective quest for a more humane and integrated existence, is a marathon, not a sprint. It demands sustained effort, unwavering commitment, and an enduring faith in the human capacity for growth and compassion. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when the sheer scale of the task feels overwhelming. But within the heart of the collective, a resilient spirit must persist, fueled by the vision of a better world. The healing of the individual and the healing of society are not distinct processes. They are deeply interconnected, reflecting and informing one another, like two rivers flowing into the same vast ocean. To truly address the dis-ease of being and foster genuine liberation, we must embark upon this spiritual journey together, recognizing that the future of collective flourishing depends on our willingness to envision and build a world where every soul can find its rightful place, free from the chains of craving and disconnection. This is our profound responsibility, our ultimate challenge, and our enduring hope, the profound question lingers, a silent hum beneath the relentless grind of contemporary existence. How does a society, fragmented by countless divisions and steeped in historical inertia, cultivate the sustained compassion, wisdom, and collective effort needed to re-architect its very foundations? This is not a mere philosophical query, but an urgent societal imperative. For the current trajectory, marked by the escalating toll of addiction, suggests a collective dis-ease that demands radical introspection and transformative action. The previous explorations have meticulously unveiled the intricate layers of individual suffering, from neurobiological dysregulation to spiritual yearning, and have then broadened the lens to expose the systemic failures that perpetuate this suffering. Now, we must confront the daunting yet exhilarating challenge of actualizing the vision of collective flourishing. The journey towards societal liberation from the grip of addiction is fundamentally an evolutionary one, requiring a shift in collective consciousness as profound as any historical paradigm change. It is an endeavour that transcends mere policy adjustments or incremental reforms. It necessitates a fundamental re-evaluation of our shared values, our understanding of human nature, and our definitions of progress and well-being. This re-evaluation must begin with a courageous acknowledgement of the resistance inherent in human systems, a resistance rooted in fear, economic vested interests, the comfort of the familiar, and the often unconscious perpetuation of punitive ideologies. To overcome this, society must first undergo a process akin to individual awakening, where the illusions of separation and judgment are dismantled, giving way to an integrated understanding of our shared vulnerability and interconnected destiny. The catalyst for such a monumental shift often emerges from a crucible of crisis, a point where the prevailing mechanisms of coping and control demonstrably fail. The pervasive reach of addiction, touching every demographic and socio-economic stratum, might indeed serve as this societal crucible. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that our current structures are insufficient, perhaps even complicit in the perpetuation of widespread suffering. From this point of collective reckoning, a new narrative can begin to take root, one that reframes addiction not as a moral failing or a criminal enterprise, but as a profound symptom of deeper individual and collective wounds, a misguided search for solace and meaning in a world often devoid of genuine connection. This reframing is the intellectual and emotional cornerstone of transformation. It demands an unprecedented commitment to education, extending far beyond the confines of formal institutions. It calls for a societal pedagogy that permeates public discourse, media representation, and professional training across every sector. Imagine a world where the neurobiology of craving, the psychology of trauma, and the spiritual dimensions of longing are understood not just by specialists, but by policymakers, educators, healthcare providers, law enforcement officers, and indeed by every citizen. This widespread understanding would dismantle the pervasive stigma brick by brick, replacing judgment with empathy and fear with informed compassion. Public awareness campaigns, compelling storytelling, and a conscious effort to humanize the experience of addiction can cultivate this empathetic imagination, allowing individuals to see themselves and their loved ones reflected in the struggles of others, fostering a sense of shared humanity rather than alienating difference. Beyond intellectual understanding, the cultivation of collective compassion requires the institutionalization of empathy. This is the arduous process of translating abstract sentiment into tangible policy and practice. How do we imbue our healthcare systems with a truly trauma-informed approach, ensuring that every interaction is healing rather than re-traumatizing? How do we re-envision our justice system, moving decisively from punitive models to restorative and therapeutic frameworks, where diversion, treatment, and reintegration are the primary objectives? This requires a radical reimagining of professional roles, training, and accountability. It means recognizing that a police officer responding to a crisis involving substance use disorder is not merely an enforcer of laws, but potentially a crucial first point of contact for healing, requiring specialized training in de-escalation, harm reduction, and resource navigation. It means empowering judges to prescribe treatment and support rather than incarceration, and equipping correctional facilities to be centers of rehabilitation and skill building rather than mere detention. The challenge, however, extends beyond simply tweaking existing systems. It demands a fundamental re-architecture. Many of our current structures, particularly economic ones, are inadvertently or even actively antithetical to the principles of collective flourishing. The pursuit of profit often overshadows the imperative of public health, leading to fragmented healthcare access, underfunded social services, and the perpetuation of conditions that breed despair and vulnerability. Addressing the foundational inequities, housing insecurity, poverty, educational disparities, is not merely an act of charity, but a strategic investment in societal well-being. It recognizes that a stable home, a living wage, and access to quality education are not luxuries, but essential bulwarks against the forces that drive individuals towards addiction, the reallocation of resources, the restructuring of economic incentives, and the prioritizing of human dignity over corporate profit become indispensable components of this societal re-architecture. Overcoming the resistance to such radical transformation is perhaps the most formidable aspect of this spiritual endeavor. It requires confronting the shadow of society, the collective acedia that manifests as apathy, the tanha that clings to outdated ideologies, and the fear of relinquishing control or perceived advantage. This resistance can be subtle, embedded in bureaucratic inertia, or overt, championed by powerful interests that benefit from the status quo. It demands visionary leadership that can articulate a compelling future, inspire hope, and mobilize collective action. But it also requires grassroots movements, where individuals and communities, empowered by a shared vision, advocate tirelessly for change, challenging entrenched power structures and demanding accountability. The moral courage to speak truth to power, to advocate for the marginalized, and to persist in the face of setbacks is paramount. The integration of spiritual principles into collective action provides a powerful framework for this sustained effort. Concepts like interconnectedness, compassion, karuna, and shared humanity, Ubuntu, are not abstract ideals but blueprints for policy and social movements. They remind us that the suffering of one is inextricably linked to the well-being of all. This understanding fosters a sense of collective responsibility, moving beyond individual blame to embrace a shared commitment to healing. Practices such as collective mindfulness, where communities reflect on their shared challenges and aspirations, can foster a deeper sense of belonging and purpose, counteracting the atomization that so often contributes to feelings of isolation and despair. Meaning-making, traditionally an individual pursuit, becomes a communal endeavour, as societies collectively define their purpose beyond material accumulation, striving instead for genuine well-being, equity, and sustainable flourishing. This transformation is not a single event, but an ongoing intergenerational process. It requires sustained commitment, constant discernment, and a willingness to adapt as new challenges emerge. It is a testament to the enduring human capacity for growth, resilience, and evolution. The cultivation of virtues, compassion, wisdom, courage, justice, must become a collective aspiration, woven into the fabric of our institutions and the ethos of our communities. It means investing not just in immediate interventions, but in the long-term stewardship of a society that actively nurtures human potential, prevents suffering, and fosters genuine connection. The ultimate vision is a society where the roots of addiction are systematically addressed at every level: biological, psychological, and spiritual, both individually and collectively. It is a society that understands addiction not as a moral failing to be punished, but as a profound symptom of disconnection and unmet needs, to be met with understanding, care, and robust support. This future is one where healthcare is truly universal and holistic, justice is restorative and rehabilitative, education is empowering and equitable, and communities are vibrant tapestries of genuine belonging. It is a future where the relentless pursuit of meaning finds healthy and constructive outlets, where suffering is met with collective compassion, and where the inherent dignity of every human being is not just acknowledged, but actively upheld and celebrated. The path is arduous, but the destination, a world of collective flourishing where individual and societal healing are inextricably linked, is a testament to humanity's highest potential. The journey towards collective liberation from the chains of addiction, as previously articulated, is not merely a policy reform or a series of legislative acts. It is a profound spiritual endeavour demanding a seismic shift in collective consciousness. This quote, 46, a turning away from the individualistic craving, tanhe, and collective apathy, acedia, that have long characterized modern existence, represents an arduous intergenerational undertaking. Tanha in this context manifests as an insatiable hunger for more possessions, more status, more fleeting pleasures, often at the expense of genuine connection and well-being. It drives a relentless consumerism and an egocentric striving that leaves individuals feeling perpetually unfulfilled. Concurrently, acedia whispers a dangerous indifference, a collective shrug in the face of widespread suffering, a disengagement from the plight of our neighbours and the decay of our communities. It allows us to rationalise inaction, to believe that problems are individual failures rather than systemic wounds. Yet the very recognition of its necessity ignites a crucial inquiry. How does a society truly repent? How does it collectively reorient its deepest values and institutional structures towards interdependence, shared purpose, and the genuine well-being of all its members? This is not a question for theologians alone, but a pragmatic challenge for every citizen, every policymaker, every community leader. This transformation, we contend, begins with a radical act of collective self-reflection, a fearless gaze into the mirror of our shared humanity. It requires us to acknowledge not only the suffering endured by individuals grappling with addiction, but also our collective complicity in creating and perpetuating systems that foster such vulnerability. Societal repentance is at its core an admission of harm, a recognition that the relentless pursuit of economic growth above all else, the erosion of communal bonds through hyper-individualism, the systemic neglect of marginalized populations, and the inadequate provision of mental health care have exacted a devastating toll. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, that our profit-driven healthcare models often prioritize quick fixes over holistic healing, that our justice system too frequently criminalizes illness, and that our educational frameworks sometimes fail to equip young people with essential emotional resilience. This necessitates a profound shift from a punitive, individualistic lens, which often blames the afflicted, asking, quote, 47, quote, to a compassionate systemic understanding that sees addiction as a symptom of deeper societal disease, prompting the question, quote, 48, quote, this shift in perspective is not an abdication of personal responsibility, but an expansion of it, recognizing that our individual fates are interwoven. To cultivate this collective wisdom and empathy, a sustained and comprehensive educational initiative becomes paramount. This is not merely about disseminating scientific facts, though neurobiological understanding and psychological models are vital. It is about fostering a deep visceral empathy that transcends statistics and touches the human heart. Education, in this context, transforms into a form of storytelling, where the lived experiences of addiction are brought forth with dignity and nuance, dismantling the pervasive stigma that has long shrouded these narratives in shame. Imagine a society where prime-time media portrayals move beyond sensationalism, offering authentic, multidimensional characters who navigate recovery with courage and vulnerability. Envision community dialogues, held in town halls and neighborhood centers, where individuals with lived experience share their journeys, fostering genuine connection and mutual understanding. Picture integrated curricula from early childhood onward, teaching emotional literacy, stress management, and the importance of healthy relationships, normalizing conversations about mental health and substance use before crises emerge. Through these pathways, we can begin to humanize the experience of addiction on a mass scale, revealing its universal roots in human longing, pain, and vulnerability. When a society understands that addiction is not a moral failing but a complex interplay of genetic predisposition, environmental stress, trauma, and a misguided search for connection and solace, the foundation for genuine compassion is laid, making punitive responses seem not only ineffective but profoundly inhumane. This integrated understanding must draw from the wellsprings of diverse knowledge systems. Scientific rigor, with its insights into neurochemistry, genetic predispositions, and psychological processes, converges with ancient spiritual wisdom, offering profound frameworks for meaning-making, existential solace, and the cultivation of inner peace. Consider how modern neuroscience validates mindfulness practices that have been central to spiritual traditions for millennia, demonstrating their capacity to rewire the brain and enhance emotional regulation. The empirical evidence supporting trauma-informed care aligns seamlessly with indigenous traditions, emphasizing the healing power of community, connection to the sacred, and restorative justice practices that prioritize repair over punishment. By weaving together these threads, biology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality, we construct a richer, more holistic tapestry of understanding, one that empowers individuals and communities alike to address addiction from multiple vantage points, acknowledging the whole person in their complex ecological context. This multidimensional approach moves beyond reductionist explanations, embracing the mystery and interconnectedness of human experience. From this foundation of collective empathy and integrated wisdom, Cis Quote 49, can begin to emerge. This culture transcends the limited notion of individual responsibility, asserting a shared collective duty for the well-being of every member. It is a proactive stance, one that prioritizes upstream prevention over reactive crisis management. Instead of waiting for addiction to manifest in its most devastating forms, a culture of care invests robustly in early childhood development, ensuring secure attachment and nurturing environments, universal high-quality childcare, extended parental leave policies, and comprehensive family support programs. It integrates social-emotional learning into educational frameworks from kindergarten through college, equipping individuals with resilience, self-regulation skills, empathy, and healthy coping mechanisms to navigate life's inevitable challenges. It recognizes that the greatest defense against addiction lies in fostering conditions where genuine connection, purpose, and meaning are readily accessible to all, not just a privileged few. This means creating vibrant public spaces, supporting community arts and mentorship programs, and ensuring equitable access to opportunities that foster a sense of belonging and contribution. Redefining societal success becomes a critical component of this cultural shift. The prevailing metrics of gross domestic product and individual accumulation, which often mask profound social inequalities and environmental degradation, must yield to indicators of holistic well-being, robust mental and physical health outcomes, communal cohesion and trust, environmental stewardship, equitable access to quality education and healthcare, and a pervasive sense of belonging and purpose. When a society values the flourishing of its people above all else, its policies and priorities naturally align with the principles of prevention and compassionate intervention. This redefinition is a direct challenge to the Tanha of endless acquisition, which tells us that more is always better, even at the cost of human dignity, and the acedia of indifference to systemic suffering, which allows us to turn a blind eye to the true human cost of our economic models. It redirects collective energy towards building a truly just and nurturing world, where the measure of our prosperity is the health and happiness of our most vulnerable, not just the wealth of a few. The spiritual dimension of this collective action is profound. Just as individual recovery often hinges on finding a renewed sense of purpose and connection, societal healing requires a shared vision that transcends narrow self-interest. Working collaboratively towards a common goal, a society where the conditions for addiction are systematically dismantled and pathways to flourishing are abundant, can itself be a powerful antidote to collective tana and acedia. When individuals feel genuinely connected to a larger purpose, contributing their unique talents and energies to the well-being of their community and future generations, the gnawing emptiness that often precedes addictive behaviors begins to recede. This shared purpose fosters a deep sense of interdependence, replacing the atomization of modern life, where individuals often feel isolated despite hyperconnectivity, with robust networks of mutual support and care. It cultivates an understanding that our individual flourishing is inextricably linked to the flourishing of the whole, a profound realization that can ignite a powerful collective will for change. This transformation, however, is not without its formidable challenges. The forces of inertia, entrenched economic interests that profit from existing systems of illness and incarceration, political resistance fueled by fear, ignorance and partisan divides, and deep-seated ideologies that cling to outdated notions of justice and individual culpability, will inevitably emerge. One might hear the cynical voice, "But who will pay for all this care?" Or the fearful whisper, "Are we excusing bad behavior?" Overcoming these obstacles demands visionary leadership across all sectors, leadership characterized not by charisma alone, but by unwavering compassion, intellectual courage to challenge the status quo, and a profound commitment to ethical action. It requires a persistent, compassionate advocacy that educates, persuades, and mobilizes, even in the face of setbacks and entrenched opposition. It means having the courage to speak truth to power, to dismantle systems that perpetuate harm, and to build new ones rooted in healing and equity. Sustaining momentum in such a long-term endeavor necessitates celebrating small victories while remaining steadfast in the larger vision. It is a marathon, not a sprint, demanding patience, resilience, and a continuous renewal of commitment. Each successful diversion program that offers treatment instead of jail time, each community garden that fosters connection and food security, each policy shift that prioritizes well-being over profit, contributes to the gradual re-architecture of our societal foundations. These incremental changes accumulated over time begin to weave the fabric of a new normal, where empathy is institutionalized, care is collectivized, and the default response to suffering is not judgment, but genuine support and an inquiry into its systemic roots. We must recognize that every small step forward is a testament to the collective will, a reaffirmation of the shared pledge. Ultimately, the vision is not of a society entirely free from suffering, for suffering is an inherent aspect of the human condition. Rather, it is of a society where the roots of addiction, the profound dis-ease of being, the yearning for connection, the trauma, the systemic injustices are systematically addressed. It is a society where individuals who experience vulnerability find robust structures of support, understanding, and clear pathways to healing, rather than shame and isolation. It is a world where the search for meaning is met not with the empty promises of a substance or behavior, but with genuine connection, purpose, and belonging within a supportive community. This is not an endpoint to be reached, but an ongoing process of becoming, a continuous striving for a more humane, just, and compassionate collective existence. The societal repentance, therefore, is not a singular event, but a living, breathing commitment to perpetual transformation, an intergenerational pledge to cultivate a world where every human heart finds its true home, nurtured and valued. The blueprint for a world emancipated from the pervasive grip of addiction, a society where human flourishing supplants the gnawing emptiness of craving, stands before us, meticulously detailed in its integrated approach to individual healing and its vision for collective well-being. Yet between this articulate vision and its tangible manifestation lies a chasm, profound and formidable. The societal repentance we speak of is not merely a series of policy adjustments or programmatic reforms. It demands a fundamental reorientation of the collective consciousness, a radical reframing of our most deeply held values and assumptions. This is where the formidable resistance, previously identified as inertia, vested interests, and the primal fear of change, reveals its true multi-layered complexity. Inertia, in this context, is not merely a passive resistance to movement. It is the sedimented weight of established norms, entrenched institutions, and habitual modes of thought that have, over generations, coalesced into the very bedrock of our societal architecture. It is the comfortable familiarity of the status quo, even when that status quo perpetuates suffering. This inertia manifests in the bureaucratic labyrinth that resist innovation, in the educational curricula that fail to integrate trauma-informed pedagogy, and in the public discourse that defaults to moralistic judgments rather than empathetic inquiry. It is the unexamined assumption that current systems, however flawed, are immutable, and that radical change is an impractical utopian fantasy. The quiet hum of everyday life, often oblivious to the systemic roots of suffering, becomes a powerful, almost imperceptible force against the imperative for transformation. Beyond inertia, the spectre of vested interests casts a long, chilling shadow. The very societal structures that inadvertently foster addiction often generate immense profit and power for specific sectors. Consider the pharmaceutical industries, whose pursuit of profit can sometimes overshadow the imperative for responsible prescribing practices, or the development of non-addictive pain management alternatives. Observe the carceral state, an expansive enterprise that benefits from the criminalization of addiction, perpetuating a cycle of incarceration rather than investing in comprehensive treatment and rehabilitation. The economic landscape, too, is implicated, with industries that thrive on the exploitation of vulnerability, from predatory lending to the normalization of hyperconsumerism, each subtly feeding the insatiable hunger that addiction exploits. These interests are not always overtly malicious. Often, they are simply the logical outcome of systems designed primarily for capital accumulation rather than human thriving. Dismantling these structures requires confronting deeply entrenched economic and political power, a task that demands sustained, organized collective action against formidable opposition. The chains that bind individuals to addiction are often forged within the very economic engines that drive our modern world. And then there is fear, a primal, visceral force that often underpins both inertia and the protection of vested interests. There is the fear of economic disruption, the anxiety that a shift away from punitive models might destabilize established industries or lead to unforeseen financial consequences. There is the fear of the unknown, the apprehension that dismantling familiar systems, however imperfect, might unleash chaos or create new, unmanageable problems. Perhaps most profoundly, there is the fear of vulnerability, both personal and collective. To acknowledge addiction as a societal ailment, rather than an individual failing, is to admit to our shared fragility, to confront the uncomfortable truth that any one of us, or our loved ones, could be touched by its shadow. It demands a level of empathy that requires us to see ourselves in the suffering other, to recognize our interconnectedness, and to surrender the illusion of invincibility that often accompanies societal privilege. This fear often manifests as a reluctance to invest in comprehensive social safety nets, a resistance to universal health care, or a punitive stance towards those deemed other, all of which serve to maintain a perceived distance from the uncomfortable realities of human suffering. The central, unresolved mystery, therefore, is not merely what needs to be done, but how a fragmented society bound by these forces of inertia, self-interest, and fear can cultivate the sustained compassion, wisdom, and collective effort necessary for this systemic transformation. How do we bridge the chasm between intellectual understanding and lived societal reality? This question calls for an exploration of the very mechanisms of collective change, the alchemy that transmutes individual awareness into shared purpose. We must first acknowledge that true societal transformation is rarely a top-down mandate. It is a complex, iterative process fueled by a confluence of factors. It begins with the cultivation of a moral imagination, the capacity to envision a future radically different from the present, one where the well-being of all is genuinely prioritized. This requires narratives that humanize, education that enlightens, and art that inspires. It demands that we actively challenge the dominant cultural scripts that normalize competition over cooperation, isolation over community, and material gain over spiritual fulfillment. When we speak of redefining societal success beyond material gain, we are invoking a profound paradigm shift, one that elevates metrics of human connection, ecological harmony, mental wellness, and collective resilience. Such a shift necessitates a fundamental re-evaluation of what constitutes progress. Is it measured solely by GDP growth, or by the reduction of suffering, the cultivation of meaning, and the equitable distribution of opportunity? This is not merely an academic exercise. It is a call to embed virtues such as compassion, karuna, loving kindness, metta, and equanimity, upekkha, not just in individual ethics, but into the very fabric of our institutional design. Imagine healthcare systems where empathy is a core competency, justice systems where restorative practices supersede retributive impulses, and economic policies that explicitly aim to eliminate precarity and foster dignity for every individual. This requires a collective awakening to the profound interdependence of all beings, a recognition that the suffering of one diminishes us all, and the flourishing of one enriches the collective. The African philosophy of Ubuntu, which posits, "I am because we are," offers a powerful counter-narrative to the atomizing forces of modern individualism, reminding us that genuine selfhood is realized through connection and mutual care. The cultivation of this collective will also demand visionary leadership, not merely in political office, but across all sectors of society. These leaders are not simply managers of the status quo. They are courageous architects of a new reality, capable of articulating a compelling vision that resonates with the deepest human longings for meaning and connection. They must possess the wisdom to navigate complex systems, the resilience to withstand entrenched opposition, and the moral clarity to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term gains. Such leadership fosters environments where difficult conversations can occur, where diverse perspectives are genuinely valued, and where experimentation and learning are embraced as essential components of progress. It is leadership that understands the deep psychological underpinnings of societal resistance and can guide communities through the discomfort of transformation with both firmness and compassion. Furthermore, sustaining this transformation requires an intergenerational commitment. The seeds of change planted today may not bear full fruit for decades. This implies a profound responsibility to educate and empower future generations, instilling in them not just knowledge, but a deep sense of moral purpose and collective stewardship. It involves creating cultural mechanisms through education, community rituals, and shared narratives that transmit values of empathy, equity, and interconnectedness across time. It means designing systems with foresight, building resilience into our social infrastructure, and ensuring that the pursuit of holistic well-being remains a continuous evolving endeavour rather than a fleeting project. This long-term vision requires a willingness to defer immediate gratification for the sake of enduring collective benefit, a challenging proposition in a world often driven by instant results and short electoral cycles. The journey toward this collective reawakening is thus a crucible, a refining process that tests the very limits of our collective capacity for compassion and wisdom. It is a continuous engagement with the dis-ease of being, not just within individuals, but within the societal body itself. The forces of fragmentation, political polarization, economic inequality, cultural atomization are formidable adversaries. Yet, within the human spirit lies an enduring capacity for transcendence, for seeking meaning beyond the material, for forging genuine connection even in the face of profound division. The quiet hum of individual longing, which can so easily be hijacked by addiction, also contains the resonant frequency of shared humanity, a yearning for belonging and purpose that can, when amplified by collective intention, become a powerful engine for change. The whisper of possibility, if nurtured and amplified, grows into a shout for justice and healing. The profound mystery remains not as an impenetrable wall, but as an urgent invitation to engage in the arduous, iterative work of building bridges of understanding, of dismantling the structures of suffering, and of cultivating a world where every individual's search for meaning is met not with exploitation or judgment, but with unwavering support and genuine connection. This is the ultimate aspiration, the horizon towards which we must continuously strive, understanding that the path itself, fraught with challenges and demanding immense courage, is an integral part of the healing process. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit, capable of both profound suffering and extraordinary transformation, that such a vision, however distant, remains a tangible possibility.